It's really cool that the vice president of the United States of America is like a confirmed 4chan, fake Catholic, trad convert, reject Vatican II type guy, you know?
Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that
I promise you he doesn't practice. I promise. I have never known a Catholic convert to actually practice.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line?
I love fake Christians, man. They would string Christ up on the, they would lynch him. You know, they wouldn't even give him the cross if they got the chance to. Yeah, do not commit the sin of empathy. Do not, literally, like every Republican losing their shit at the bishop or whatever. What was her title again, pastor? I don't know. Who literally just said, like, be kind to those less fortunate, and they all lost their shit over it. Remarkable stuff. Anyway, JD Vance was getting into a classic tradcath beef on Twitter. Here. Rory Stewart. A bizarre take on John 15:12-13, less Christian and more pagan tribal. We should start worrying when politicians become theologians, assume to speak for Jesus and tell us in which order to love. And it's from this statement that JD Vance made, which is very unchristian.
Old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family.
Again, I got to be clear, because people love to throw out hypocrisy arguments on this one, and there's like a million copes that Christians have for not following their own book. And the primary one that the tradcath converts use on the internet is, you can't call me out on all of the obvious hypocrisy and the fact that I don't actually care about the Bible or anything Jesus taught because you're not Christian. To which the obvious answer is, you know, I think that morality is intersubjective. They think it's universal and God's law. You know, a statement of mine on morality literally shouldn't depend. Like, my belief in it shouldn't affect their perspective on whether or not it applies to their belief system. Essentially, their argument is like, how can you call me a hypocrite when you don't believe what I believe in? It's a non sequitur. Also, you can believe in a shared value, right? You know, Jesus drank water, I drink water. Simple.
Family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world.
That's true. It's very Christ-like. I remember the part where Christ said, you have to care about people in your nation's borders more than people in other nations' borders. I remember that part very specifically from the Bible. It's literally the opposite. Yeah, but they don't care. And he doesn't practice Christianity. And the Christians that do don't care either, you know?
A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think
they don't. It's classic cope from these people who don't believe in anything except their own power. The idea that the left, like, hates society. You know, the best way to show you hate a society is by trying to argue for, like, health care for citizens of that society, higher wages, you know, better existences, paid maternity and paternity leave.
The profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership, and President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
I've always said that, like, religious people don't actually believe in religion unless it already agrees with them. You almost never hear of people who have a sincere change of their, like, on their position, on their morals, because the good book they believe in has told them to. You know, no one, like, if there's something in there that agrees with them, they're all for it, you know? But a million things in there that disagree with them, you know, interpretation this, interpretation that, or they'll just write it off entirely. This is a particularly egregious example because, like, some of the most famous, well-known, and explicit writings of Christ are on who your neighbor is. The Good Samaritan thing, even I know this, you know? And I'm a godless heathen. Like, it's so explicit. He wrote it out, like, directly. It doesn't matter, of course, you know, Christ being kind to, yeah, prostitutes or the meek or the poor, you know, they turn this over. They don't give a shit. You know, Jesus Christ, you know, flips the table in the temple. But they have that was that Reverend at Trump's inauguration who then went on to shill a crypto coin on Twitter the day of. Incredible stuff. That was really good. They ripped those pages out. Well, it's like I've said before, and this is like a paleo-Marxist perspective. This goes way back, okay? It's not that religion makes you a bad person. And it's not that religion doesn't sometimes promote senses like a sense of community, solidarity. It's not like a holistically bad thing. It's a belief system that's irrational, but that doesn't, like, there are lots of irrational belief systems that we use to get through, like, day by day. That doesn't necessarily mean in all cases that it's bad. Like, I'm not going to take that hard line of a stance. But the Marxist perspective on religion as an institution is that it's always been something that you ally with as the state to get good behavior out of your peasants, you know? The nobility, the aristocrats, they can claim to be godly, but they do whatever the they want, and they always have. Their piousness has never stopped them from living, you know, the life they wanted to live, killing lots of people, raping people. They don't care. But Christ has, well, not really, but like they say, Christ has very strong words for like the peasantry being diligent. It's the same with Christianity, Islam, Confucianism. Oh, over in the East, all this goes like twice over. You know, like the Protestant work ethic over here is pretty bad, where the Lutherans or whatever were like, well, actually, you know, the way you get into heaven is by picking crops faster, slave. But over, you know, over there, an insanely like authoritarian belief system about respecting your elders, it's, like, structured on every level, you know, crazy, crazy stuff. You can believe in that or you cannot. But yeah, I don't know. Calvinists? We don't talk about Calvinists in this household. Thank you. We don't believe in that. So anyway, J.D. Vance said something that is objectively anti-Christ here. The idea that it is Christian to love first your family, then your neighbor, then like other people in the country, and then other people in other countries or whatever. And J.D. Vance responded with a quote tweet by referring to Ordo Amoris, which, you know what, I'll go and Google right now, which is a writing by Saint Augustine, not Jesus Christ. Sorry, a little bit farther down the list. But anyway, does Rory really think his moral duties to his own children are the same as his duties to a stranger who lives thousands of miles away? Does anyone? I can tell you at least one person who believed that. I can tell you at least one guy in history who thought that. Just one, you know, just a historical figure. One guy. And then he says that Rory is a midwit. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The problem with Rory and people like him is that he has an IQ of 110 and he thinks he has an IQ of 130. This false arrogance drives so much elite failure over the last 40 years. I love having a 4chaner vice president. Anyway, yeah, this has led to a lot of like religious-minded and theologian types on the internet debating over this. There's not really any debate though. Doesn't the story of the Good Samaritan tell the opposite of Vance? Yeah, that's the point. Jesus explicitly wrote on this, like very explicitly. There's no room for it. It's not really an interpretation thing, I'm afraid. It's pretty straightforward. Wrote? You know what I mean. He said. Jesus didn't write anything. Thank you. My biblical knowledge. I apologize. You're right. I'm seeing right now, if you look up Ordo Amoris, because nobody cares about this shit except for fake Catholic converts. Compact Mag, which is the fascist internet magazine staffed and written by fascists that briefly had Slavoj Žižek on. You might recall I covered it in that context. Is saying that J.D. Vance is right about Ordo Amoris, which he's not. It's a fascist magazine. Baptist News Global. Theologians push back on J.D. Vance's view of ordered love. Vice President J.D. Vance getting schooled by theologians over his inverted theology, expressed in a January 29th Fox News article. Well, thank you, Baptist News. Goes without saying, but Vance also really misunderstands Ordo Amoris. Well, he doesn't misunderstand it, he just doesn't believe in it. Again, like, these people don't study the book or the teachings or whatever. They find snippets that justify pre-existing political biases they had. I tell you, what happens first? Becoming a fascist or becoming a fake Catholic convert? It's becoming a fascist. No, it never happens the other way around. Nobody is like, I am a normal person without biases. I will become a Catholic convert for some reason. Oh, now I'm a fascist. Never happens. Ever. Never happens. It's always a fascist uses it as a metaphysical justification for their pre-existing biases. Now, in addition to having, you know, the arguments they could normally employ in favor of their biases, they can also pretend to be religious in favor of it. Andrew Tate did this with Islam. Remember? In the fakest Muslim conversion ever. He was like, actually a Muslim now, and now all of my arguments on how to become a top G are backed by the Quran or whatever. But did he care? No, he was like drinking on his private flights. It's just a transparent grift, but it gave him a little extra weight. Didn't Jesus also say, camel past the eye of the needle than it would be for rich men to get heaven? Yeah, but they don't, you can't talk about that with a Christian. No, they do just pretend he didn't say that. There's no, a lot of Catholic converts just want to LARP as crusaders. Yeah, you learn about crusaders like in history, and they were mostly just like peasants pissing and shitting themselves and raping villages they went through, many of them Christian villages, angering Orthodox Christians, doing nothing, accomplishing nothing. The Crusades were like an objective failure on every front. But you know, nowadays, like, you pretend they're based because you saw a bunch of AI-generated images of guys in like the bucket helms with the cross on the front, you know? The Bible's full of contradictions. That's true. But you know what? I'll give credit. Jesus's teachings aren't. The Bible's full of contradictions, but the baseline stuff that's ascribed to the teachings of Christ, actually pretty straightforward, and for the most part, pretty morally on the up and up. You know, I'm not gonna do the bullshit people say, like, you know, Christ was a socialist. He wasn't. People like to say that shit. Was he a hippie? I don't know. Maybe like a, you know, 0th century hippie. I don't really care. It's sort of a meaningless categorization in the context of the, you know, of history. But, you know, Jesus literally told slaves to serve their masters as they would God. Oh, speaking of, make sure to like and subscribe the stream, hit the bell for more notifications, and donate if you have the spare change to do so. Amen. Anyway, yeah, politics aside, numerous Christian theologians took to social media to point out the vice president, who is a conservative Catholic, misrepresented the teachings of Jesus and the Gospels. Actually, no, wrote Jesuit priest and author James Martin. This misses the point of Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. Well, it doesn't miss the point, it just ignores it. After Jesus tells a lawyer that you should love your neighbor as yourself, the lawyer asks him, and who is my neighbor? In response, Jesus tells the story of a Jewish man who has been beaten by robbers and is lying by the side of the road. The man is helped not by those closest to him, a priest and a Levite, but rather by a Samaritan. At the time, Jews and Samaritans would have been considered one another's enemies. It's pretty straightforward. Who is your neighbor? All men are your neighbor. Not women, though. They're stinky. But this is such like a famous parable that Good Samaritan is now considered to be like a religious neutral phrase. Or it's like a euphemism. It's a term that goes beyond Christian usage. Everyone knows what a Good Samaritan is. It's like universally acknowledged in English. And presumably in other languages, you know. I'm not French. I assume that French also say Good Samaritan. They just say, like, you know, Good Samaritan, or something like that. We literally have Good Samaritan laws in the US. Yeah, it's just like a bedrock of language. It's ubiquitous. Exactly. It's so well known. So it's funny that J.D. Vance is picking a fight over it. People know what Good Samaritans are, but we don't know what Samaritans are. Yeah, to an extent, I suppose. But like, yeah, the Samaritans are gone now, you know, functionally as a group. At least one that's recognized in the way that, like, the phrase Good Samaritan is. But we know what it means. Vance's own church called him out and told him to off. Wait, really? Wait. Is that true? Did his own church put out a statement over this? You have to, don't dangle that in front of me. Okay, so not for this statement specifically, but just for the Trump administration being, like, extremely anti-Jesus. Samaritans are still here, not many, though. Really? Huh. An ethno-religious group originating from the Hebrews and Israelites in the area. Okay, so I'm sorry. My impression was that the Samaritans were a dead and gone group. Total population around 900. Wow. That's wild. That's crazy. Bro, pagans still exist. I'm not saying that pagans don't exist. I'm saying that the Samaritans haven't exactly been like a dominant ethnic group for... You just don't hear about them, but okay. Why they almost die out? I mean, there's a lot of ethnic groups in history that just haven't made it all the way forward. Not many Mesopotamians left, you know, people get assimilated, they become other ethnic groups. Wait, what the fuck? So the English term is just the name of an ethnic group and we just use their name as a word? Yeah, well, Good Samaritan, that you're referring to Samaritan like proper noun, but yeah, basically. Isn't that kind of nice? Like, there are so many ethnic groups that have been condemned to the dust of history, but Samaritans in particular are known not just for one of the most famous teachings of Christ, but one in which they're remembered positively. Like, wouldn't it be worse if Jesus was like, yeah, but watch out for the bad Samaritan, and he told a parable of, like, a time a Samaritan guy pissed on your shoes. And then we're like, yeah, watch out for bad Samaritans, you know. No, Vosh, he was the only good Samaritan. It's implied they're bad on average. No, that's not true. The Jews and the Samaritans were enemies, but Jesus's point was that, like, all men are your brothers, basically. Like, your neighbor just refers to... It doesn't refer to family, ethnicity. It doesn't even refer to tribal loyalty or whatever. It literally just refers to, like, those around you who do kindness, those in proximity. But not proximity, like, around you physically, you know? More in, like, an all men are brothers kind of way. Yeah, Jesus's point was, who is your neighbor? That one specific Samaritan. And he's everyone's neighbor. You know, kind of like how Tom was everyone's friend on MySpace. Yes, it's applied they're bad on average. Read scripture. No. No, why would I do that? I'm talking about the point of that parable. I'm not an expert on Judeo-Samaritan relations circa 2,000 years ago. Voss showing his age with a MySpace reference. That was like 2006 or something. So it just wasn't that long ago. It's a pretty, like, well-known... All right, whatever. You can try to make me feel old. I don't feel old. 20 years ago, bro? Yeah, we're talking about something that happened 2,020 years ago right now. I'm like, oh, you know the parable of the Good Samaritan? Nobody in chat's like, bro, Unc was around for the animal sacrifices. Yo. Dude saw the hanging in Gardens of Babylon. You. If you don't know about MySpace and, like, basic lore about MySpace, that's just an ignorance problem. That's literally, like, social media rules your life. You wake up and go to sleep looking at social media. You don't know about, like, the one thing everyone knows about the preeminent social media company. The one that predated, that was the flourishing point to everything else. I make GeoCities references, and that was before my time. Why does nobody call me old when I make GeoCities references? You were old? Yeah, well, I bet I'm healthier than you.